Hey, let's get one thing straight. Your brain is not wired for your happiness. Sorry, but what your brain is wired for is your survival, which means it is constantly scanning for danger, cataloging mistakes, and replaying that one awkward thing you said 17 years ago like that is the highlight reel of your life. Look, it's not personal, it's biology. But just because that's the brain's default doesn't mean we have to let it drive the bus. Because once we realize our mental autopilot is programmed to take the express train to negative town, we can begin to interrupt that ride. We can say, hey, thanks for trying to help, brain, but I got it from here. You might feel like a crazy person talking like that, but sometimes that's what you have to do. You gotta talk to yourself. And that's when the real work begins. Choosing what to put in its place instead of that fear-based narrative. Because what if all we ever look for is what's wrong? Well, guess what? You are going to keep finding. That's right, friends. Things that are wrong. So, how do we rewrite this narrative? Well, the way I do it and why I keep an archive of awesome is just for that. My archive of awesome is not a gratitude journal. It's not a highlight reel meant for Instagram. It's a deeply personal, wildly unfiltered collection of memories, mementos, and moments that remind me who I am. It reminds me who I am when fear tries to tell me otherwise. Because here's the deal, everybody. Fear does not fight fair. Fear doesn't fight fair. The part of your brain that stores fear, well, that doesn't recognize time. Again, biology. That's why something that happened decades ago can still make your stomach drop today. That's why a failure at 15 years old can stop you in your tracks at 45. So if fear's not going to play fair, then neither should we. Which is why I fight back with some guerrilla tactics. I collect any evidence that reminds me of who I am at my best, even if that is decades old. Because even if it's small, even if it's silly, here's another truth I use to turn down the volume of fear. Fear hates facts. So, inside my archive of awesome, physically inside of it, in my office here behind me, nestled between a memento acquired supporting Homeland Security project in the subway tunnels beneath New York City, which that was wild, and a challenge coin from an advanced military communication project, nestled between those things is a tiny bronze medallion on a yellow and blue ribbon. It is from my Cub Scout Pinewood Derby. 3rd place, baby. I was maybe about 7 years old. But that tiny bronze medallion is one of my prized achievements. Earned, 4 decades ago. The world would tell me, who cares about that? But that's not what you're keeping track of. You're keeping track of your achievements. It's what makes a difference for you. That's what keeping track of your stuff is about. It's not what the world says. It's what makes a difference for you. And to this day, that tiny bronze medallion is one of my most prized possessions. Not because of the win itself, but because of what it represents. That medallion represents a core memory building that car with my dad and learning the value of craft, precision, and patience. Honestly, that moment, what I learned, shaped the trajectory that eventually led me to becoming an engineer. See, that is the time when I realized that if I really understood the way things worked, I could change the way they functioned to make them better. That did also lead to numerous disassemblies of various things throughout my childhood and let's face it, adult life that never quite went back together correctly. But here's the truth. If I only listened to my inner critic, that medallion would be in a junk drawer. Or maybe even the trash. That inner critic voice would say to me like, why are you keeping that? That's not a real achievement. No one cares. But guess what? I care. And that's enough. Because when I look at that teeny tiny medallion, it reminds me of where I came from, and more importantly, what is possible if you understand fundamental concepts. That's what it reminds me of, and that is why it's important to me. So let's talk about redefining your wins. Let's talk about reclaiming your confidence in what you've already done. Because if you've ever felt like you haven't done enough or that your past doesn't count anymore, I challenge you. I actually encourage you to open up what your definition of success is. So many people say, like, I haven't done anything worthwhile. So open up your definition of success. Guess what? It's your life. You get to make the rules. This includes celebrating wins from childhood. Private victories no one clapped for. Moments of courage no one saw but you. So that wall behind me, yeah, it's fun to look at when I walk in. But what do I do when I'm not around it and I need to give my confidence a boost? Well, that's why I actually have an archive of awesome on my phone. And I encourage you to start yours too. So when something happens that I'm proud of, I jot it down. And what I'm doing is, number one, first of all, I'm pausing and acknowledging the win. Because like we talked about last week, acknowledging the win is not something that high performers like you and me do well. Second, you got to start knowing the fact that you're a high performer. People don't read newsletters like this or watch content like this unless you're a high performer, so own it. The second thing that keeping this archive of awesome on your phone or writing it down in a journal does is keeping track of these wins. It's not about keeping a brag book to show to others. This is a record of things you have done to remind the future you that you can do hard things. Because let's face it, life gets tough, and sometimes you need to give yourself some encouragement to remind yourself what you can do. So start your own archive of awesome. It doesn't have to be fancy. Just start collecting moments that remind you of your resilience, remind you of your creativity, remind you of your courage, even if no one else knew. You need to celebrate things that whisper like, hey, don't forget, you've done hard things before. You can do this too. Because if fear gets to bring up receipts from 1993 to trip you up, you better believe you get to bring your own medals too, even the third place ones. So, I don't even know how to get started on this, John. Well, here's a free one. You can say, I read this newsletter or this blog with this goal of learning something and possibly improving myself. That right there, that's something to keep track of in your archive of awesome. Because here's the deal. You might think, big deal, I'm reading a blog, listening to something, but investing your time, that's your most valuable form of payment. Time is your most valuable form of payment. And investing in yourself to make yourself a better version of you than you were yesterday, that is something to celebrate. Because most people don't put in that work on themselves. I believe in this archive of awesome so much. As a free gift to you, here's a link to a Google Doc template so you can keep it on your phone for a quick edition of something awesome that just happened, or maybe to use it as a pep talk in the future. Onward and upward, everybody. Please know I'm cheering you on, and it's time that you cheered yourself on too. See ya.